Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review is brought to you in part by Rogers Hobby Center in Saginaw, Michigan, where the fun begins. This review covers the 1980 release of the Ferrari 312T3. It's a 120 scale kit from Tamiya, number GC-2010. The 312T series was a Ferrari Formula One car designed by Ferrari and was used from 1975 until 1980. It was easily upgradable and it was a very successful car for the F1 series. Now the kit has 151 parts molded in red, chrome, silver, and tinted clear with vinyl tires and spark plug wire. It's recommended for advanced builders due to some very small and fragile pieces and delicate decals. Now the kit was originally released in 1980 and had one re-release in 2002. When you're done, the completed car will measure about 8.5 inches long, 4 inches wide, and 2 inches high. That's Newt, our program director. He's got a question, it appears. Come on in here, Newt.
Why does it seem like the F1 Ferraris are always red?
Well, Newt, back in the 20s, many of the Italian manufacturers used red for the color of their race car designs, and it was eventually accepted as Italy's national race car color. But Ferrari has stuck with it over the years. And it's also reported that Enzo Ferrari once said that if you ask a child to draw a car, he will certainly draw it red.
Did this one win any races?
Oh yeah, this was a real gem for Ferrari. Carlos Reutemann drove the T3 car to win 3 Grand Prix races in 1978. Here are the contents of the kit. As you can see, the body parts in red and most of the major other parts in a silver gray. And the chrome pieces. The tires are pretty nice, and there's also a figure, a driver figure. Now, please remember to use these safety guidelines when using any of the products that you hear or see used in the review. And we'll be mostly using a liquid cement, sometimes super glue for fragile parts, and even some white glue or clear glue for the window pieces. Here are the decals for the kit. Now they were yellowed from age, and I wanted to brighten up the white parts especially. So I put it in a baggie and taped it to a window that faced the sun, and that will bleach out the yellow after about a week or so. And they're also very delicate. They kind of broke apart, some of them, as I was taking them off the backing. Now, I guess I would suggest you might want to use some decal setting solution, some of the types that you paint on the decals before they go on, or perhaps a light coat of clear coat to keep these from coming apart if you get some, if you find that they're pretty old. Construction starts with the motor, and you see these pieces here will be used. So you'll get those off the sprue and clean up any attachment points or parting lines that are obvious. And also note that you need to remove paint or chrome before you glue any pieces together. So we'll start by putting the engine halves together and gluing them into place, and then the front and rear covers. Now add the heads and the intake plenums. Finally, the gearbox adapter and the top cover. And paint this assembly an aluminum color. Now add the coil to the coil base and paint that semi-gloss black. So place the decals 43 and 44 on that and glue that to the engine in place. Next, paint the tank blue with decal 45 and put it on top of the engine too. Now the ignition wire needs to be cut into 6 100mm pieces, and then paint the distributor semi-gloss black and weave the wires equally between the two sides. Now attach this to the top of the engine cover, and after this was all done, I gave it kind of a black wash to accentuate the panel lines or the crevices, etc., with panel line wash there, and it accents it and gives it a little depth. Now we're going to glue the gearbox halves together with the pieces you see here, the axle and rotor, etc., and gearbox halves. And then add the axle through there, and we're going to paint these aluminum, and the CV boots are black. Be careful not to get paint on the ends of the axles where the wheels will attach because they're pretty tight fit. So paint the brake rotors gunmetal and glue them into place tight to the gearbox. So find these pieces from the kit, clean them up, and then glue all the 12 air intakes, 6 for each side there, to the plenums and paint them and the other parts with aluminum. The detail paint the brake calipers of gunmetal though, and glue the intakes to the motor next. Now add the gearbox top and rear to the gearbox, and then glue this to the rear of the motor. We'll need these parts for the next step, so go ahead and get those out and clean up the sprue attachment points. At this point in the build, I'm going to deviate from the instructions. The front and rear chrome wings are a really big part of the visuals on this car, and you can't really build it without the seams and the parting lines being left undone. So all the wing parts got stripped in a bleach bath and then assembled with some gap filling glue and smoothed over on those seams, and then re-chromed with some Alclad chrome spray. So for this step, that leaves the brake assemblies, and paint them desert yellow, you see here, and glue them to the rear rotors. Now paint the oil cooler aluminum and attach it to the top of the gearbox. The brake lights painted red and glued to the rear cage, and finally route the plug wires to the holes in the heads. You may need to further trim some of the wires. Now we're going to work on these headers, so gather these parts up and clean them up of any attachment points and seam lines, and glue the tips to the ends of the pipes and paint those flat white. Then carefully push them into their corresponding holes. They're pretty tight, and glue them into place. Next, we're going to work with some of these suspension pieces that you see here, so grab those pieces and get them ready, and then glue the hub pieces together and paint those aluminum. Now the rear arms are painted chrome silver, and the lower arms are black. You can see here in the circle I had broken one of the mounting arms there for the suspension, so I had to patch that together the best I could. But that's just to let you know these are very small, fragile parts, so be very careful when you're trying to force them together. Well, we've got some bracing and some more exhaust parts here to work with, so paint the brace black and aluminum with a black starter, and then assemble and paint the headers as you did the other pair, and glue them into place before you put that bracket on. And paint these shocks aluminum with black springs, or you can detail them a little more like I did and glue them into place, and then add the brace piece. The rear bulkhead and pieces are next, so grab those, clean them up, and paint the bulkhead and the expansion tank aluminum. And then paint the fire extinguisher red with some silver bands. Now add those to the bulkhead. Paint the connecting rods black and insert them in the rear hubs. Now glue the bulkhead to the motor while aligning the connecting rods. So make sure everything's symmetrical and aligned before the glue sets. Next we'll be working with the center section, some suspension and radiators. And so paint the radiators gunmetal, and the suspension brace is black and aluminum. And at this time I would assemble and paint all of the body pieces. So I painted the car red, Ferrari red, with the center section and aluminum, and then decaled it per instructions and gave it a clear coat. Once again, treat those decals carefully, and if you need to, you may need some clear coat to keep them all together. But then you'll have to cut them out individually. So glue the radiators in place as well as the front brace now. As I had mentioned, all the body parts were painted red, but there's a piece on the underpan here that needs to be black and aluminum, so you'll mask those off and paint them now. And then paint the seat black and put it in position. And the shifter linkage is aluminum with a black handle. So glue it next, and then glue the underpan to the main body section, looking for the gluing points. make sure to scrape your paint off where you're going to glue pieces together. We'll work with these pieces next, mostly for the brake parts, and glue the cooling ducts together and paint those a desert yellow, and then glue the calipers together and paint them a metallic gray with gunmetal rotors. Now insert the poly caps between the rotor and the cooling duct and glue those together. Next up is the front suspension. So paint the shocks of aluminum there with black rods, and the brace is a black color. And now hook the tie rods through the mounts in the front brake assemblies and glue the lower shock mount now. And now you need to use all four hands to hold the brakes and shocks in alignment while adding the top brace. It'll be a little tricky, but you need to make sure that alignment is proper. We're going to work on control portions here, so that'll include that structural piece for the steering wheel and the brace and the instruments. So glue the button panel to the dash and paint them aluminum, and then using the dash to hold them in place, glue the roll cage pieces to each other, but not to the dash yet. So after this sets, paint the roll bars gunmetal and then glue it back into place. Now the steering shaft is also gunmetal and can be added too. The wheel and the gauges are black, and don't forget decal 18 in the center of the steering wheel. In this next step, we'll be adding some front bulkhead and suspension and the driver figure pieces. So paint the driver red with a black harness and a white helmet and gloves. Now detail his face as you see fit, and decals are added per instructions. Now glue him in place and add the front dash. The tanks are white with silver bands and black caps, and the bulkhead is aluminum with black, and the front brace is black too. Now add the tanks to the bulkhead and put them in place on the front of the body, and then add the front brace. Now we're going to assemble the roll cage here, and then we're going to glue the front and rear sections together, marrying the two pieces, and then add the roll bar and the braces after they're set. These pieces, the top cowl and the aluminum or the chrome parts there, would be next. Now remember, I'd already assembled the chrome pieces in halves and then finished those after assembly, but you'd be putting those together now if not. And as the mirror housings have already been assembled too. Now the headrest is black, and that gets glued into place. And then glue the windscreen and mirrors in place with some clear parts glue or white glue. Now the last step of construction starts with the wheel and the tire assemblies, and then we use some fine sandpaper to scuff the treaded, or I should say the road surface area, for more realism. Now slide the smaller front tires over the wheels and press those into position using the poly caps. Now the rear wheels are a two-piece design, so place the poly cap in between them and glue them. Now glue the front and rear wing assemblies in, and your construction is finished. Well, this is about all the pieces that you'll have left. Some decals, mostly for, of course, the other driver that used the T3. But after all, you're finished, and you can put these in your stash. Well, there you have it. This stunning representation of the amazing Ferrari T3 version is a nice head turner. It looks great on the shelf, and with a little extra work you can really make it a real looker. It goes together fairly easily, except there are some small fragile points, and the decals may need a little extra attention. But all in all, it's a really good example of the development of the Formula One race cars, and of Ferrari's winning season in 1978 for sure. And if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you like this premium step-by-step scale model kit review. And so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can do that by clicking on the icon in the lower right of any of our reviews. And you can find us on our website, rightonreplicas.com, or Facebook. But either way, please join the crowd and get on board and build that model.